Should Jed go over first and start his job and then the family joins him later? Should we all go together? Should we ship stuff or should we buy everything new when we get there? How much is everything gonna cost? Do I get to get a job?
Hi, I'm Jed.
And I'm Hannah.
And we're the Merry Migrants.
Or we're going to be. We're just about to go on a life-changing adventure.
A little about us. We met in Seattle and got married about 8 years ago. We bought a house and we had our first kid, Kara, just as the pandemic kicked off.
Yep, so she's 3, and then our little one, Luna, is just about to turn 1.
So what are we doing?
Okay, so to give you some backstory, in May of 2018, Jen and I took a trip to New Zealand. We'd never been before. We wanted to use some travel hack points and miles that we had racked up and decided, why not New Zealand?
Yeah, so if you're one of the 5 people in the world who aren't already subscribed to Kara and Nate, you should definitely do that. They're travel hackers and global travelers who we fell in love with watching them, and they kind of planted the bug in us to do some travel hacking ourselves. And so that's how we wanted to make this trip to New Zealand work. So we gathered miles and points and we tried to figure out, how can we do this for as close to free or on the cheap as we can. And we actually managed to figure that out. So they planted that idea in us, and then we traveled to New Zealand for about 2 weeks.
Yep, and that was kind of the extent of the plan. We landed in Wellington and just wanted to explore, and we immediately fell in love. We loved the vibe of Wellington in particular, and then the rest of New Zealand as we explored. We loved the amazing environment. We loved the kind people. We found delicious food everywhere we went. It was just an amazing trip.
Yeah, it was super fun. We landed in Wellington and we drove up to Auckland over the course of 2 weeks. We stayed at a couple different places. We stopped at Hobbiton, for example, which if you haven't been there, it's insane. We love New Zealand. And so after our trip, we flew back home, and there was something about New Zealand that just didn't leave us.
We just kept talking about it. We've gone on other trips before. Both of us have traveled extensively before, but we kept talking about New Zealand and how amazing our time there had been, more than any of the other places that we had gone. And eventually those conversations of, oh wow, wasn't that amazing? And I wish we'd spent more time in, turned to, hey, what if we moved there?
I remember this coming up and us kind of laughing it off like, haha, yeah, right. We went back to our corporate jobs and just got busy, but it just kept coming up, right? We'd be watching YouTube, because we mostly just watch YouTube, and New Zealand would come up and we'd be like, oh wow, look, we should have gone there. And so we started researching, hey, maybe it is possible. Let's look into this. And immediately discovered how incredibly complicated it is for people in our situation anyway to move to New Zealand. We kept researching that and decided at some point, hey, you know what? Let's commit to this. Let's see if we can do this. And that's when we decided, hey, let's get all the paperwork together and put together what's called an expression of interest, which is basically saying, hey, New Zealand, are we allowed to apply for a visa? So we put all that paperwork together, and then
summer of 2019, we found out that we were going to be having a baby, which was amazing news. We were so excited, but also made it feel like maybe not quite the right time to move halfway across the world. So
all the way across the world.
Yeah, all the way across the world. So we had all that paperwork in order. We actually already had an immigration specialist that we were working with, and we decided to just wait until after the baby was born in the States, near family, to actually send it through.
So then we put that on hold, and then rolled around to Kara's due date, our firstborn, and boom. Global pandemic. So then not only had we put the application on hold, but now we didn't even know if the application still existed, because New Zealand shut its borders, immigration shut down, and we couldn't get any kind of information on what the status was for the most part. And nobody knew at that time, was this pandemic going to last forever? Was it going to be a couple weeks?
Yeah.
We just focused our energies toward, we're going to have this baby now.
So we had the baby, which was amazing. It was the height of the lockdown for pandemic times. That was crazy. As it became clear that that wasn't going away, that COVID was not just going to be a couple of weeks, couple of months thing, we did end up getting our immigration specialist advisor to put the application through in the system.
But then it fell.
Then, yeah, we had no visibility to it, and eventually New Zealand announced that they had just frozen the the visa application queue
Yeah.
process altogether. So we lost all visibility to what was going on and kind of gave up on it.
And as we were getting ready to have Kara, the hospital was on like maximum security lockdown. So for a while there, I didn't even know if I was going to be able to be like in the delivery room. But thankfully, that all worked out. But yeah, long story short, we kind of gave up on the New Zealand dream at that point. You know, we felt like, hey, it seems like this is a door that's closing to us. And we sort of went on about our lives. We were super busy trying to figure out how to work from home and raise a newborn, our first child. And, you know, we just went back to the grindstone.
Yep. So Kara had her first birthday. We ended up getting pregnant with our second kiddo, Luna. She was born, and it wasn't until like December of 2022 that we heard that our visa application or expression of interest was not lost, was not just thrown out, that it was actually still there. And our immigration advisor let us know that we were actually still probably gonna get to come to New Zealand.
I think we were like making dinner, and then the email came through, hey, your expression of interest is about to be selected. And we were like, what?
What?
Wait a minute.
Wait a minute.
So suddenly New Zealand is 100% back on the table. And I remember us being like super excited, but at the same time like, wait a minute. Everything is different now. We have 2 children. It's been 3 years since we decided we were going to do this and kind of gave up on the dream. Is this something we still really want to do?
We really searched ourselves. We had a lot of conversations about it and decided that, yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity that we had to take. This isn't something that comes around more than once, especially having gone through the expression of interest process. We knew we wouldn't get to do it again if we didn't take it.
So we gathered up all the paperwork, we submitted that, and lo and behold, I think like a month or 2 later, I'd been granted a visa. And our lives since then have been like a nonstop whirlwind. We're going to take you on some of that journey. Just to give you some context, right now we're in Seattle. Still, we're in an Airbnb for the next week or so, and then we're getting ready to start our crazy journey. But before we talk about that journey, let's give you a little bit more information on why we're doing it.
Yeah, so we've already touched on it a little bit, but one thing that struck us in New Zealand was just how kind and friendly people were. I mean, you can find nice people and grumpy people everywhere, but the vibe in New Zealand, everywhere we went, was more casual and more kind than what we encountered in our normal lives, and that really stuck with us.
Yeah, I think where we are in the States at least, people are for the most part kind, but they don't have time to like express that they're kind. And so in Wellington specifically, but in New Zealand as a whole, we just felt more like people took the time to be nice. And one example of that, and this is kind of a funny example because it's such a small thing, but it stood out to us. We were walking around in Wellington, and we, just because we were near it, went up to this, one of those "You Are Here" signs in Wellington that shows you kind of the city and where you are in it. And we were there for, it has to be like less than 30 seconds. And I don't even think we looked confused at the time. But two like business people who were clearly busy and on their way to something important stopped. And were just talking to us, like struck up a conversation and wanted to tell us all the things we should see and do in the area. And they were just so friendly, and it was so kind, and it seemed like they were going so out of their way for 2 complete strangers who didn't even really need help. It just made us feel really welcome there. And then there was another situation at a grocery store.
Yeah, right after that we were in a grocery store, and the people in line as well as the cashier struck up conversations with us and just genuinely wanted to talk and find out more about us. And that sort of situation happens here too, but it felt like people were just more interested in learning about each other and taking the time to talk to each other than we typically experience, and it was fun.
So there's other motivations as well. One big one for us is that we're both very kind of international people. I taught English in South Korea for a while and spent some time in Japan. And Hannah actually spent some time in China as a kid. So being kind of more globally aware is really important to us, and it's something we want to give to our kids.
And we also knew that we wanted a place with a really good work-life balance, with lots of nature, a safe place, all things that New Zealand has. There's also some things in the US that have felt increasingly dangerous or divisive or even complacent in ways that we don't want for our family. Don't get us wrong, there's lots of people, places that we are gonna miss a lot. Going overseas, that will be a challenge, but we're looking forward to getting away from some things like active shooter drills at schools for our daughter and some of the related drugs and gun violence that have become pretty painful realities in our current neighborhood and city.
And look, we know that every place has its problems, and we're not expecting New Zealand to be some kind of paradise. But objectively, having been there and having watched from a distance how the pandemic was handled and how a mass shooting was handled there, we're really excited about the leadership as well as sort of the environment and all the other opportunities that our kids will get to have.
Plus, they'll have really cute Kiwi accents, hopefully, if we stay.
Instead of fish, they'll say fush.
That's what Kara has decided that's like the key to having a New Zealand accent is saying fush instead of fish. We'll see if that ends up being true.
We'll see how that pans out.
And we don't know if New Zealand will actually be our forever home, but it's going to be our home for a while. So we're excited to bring you along and share about it as we go.
So with that, let's get to what I promised and talk a little bit about how we're doing it. Okay, so what comes next on this adventure? The timeline is a whirlwind. Like I said, right now we're in an Airbnb in Seattle. We're going to rent our house out here, and then we're going to hop on a plane to Hawaii, where we'll go to the Disney Aulani Resort for 2 nights. And then from there, we're going to board a cruise ship. You might be thinking, what?
I mean, we've done a lot of research. Obviously, we've had 3 years to think about how we could make this happen. As we were looking at how long the flights are for taking a 1 and a 3-year-old to New Zealand from Seattle, oh boy, did those 25 plus hours in a plane sound rough.
Yeah, my main concern was making sure that if we were going to get on a flight, that the other passengers would survive our children. And as our eldest has aged, it's become increasingly apparent that wouldn't be possible. So yeah, we started looking into other options, and a cruise was not the first thing on our mind. We've never done a cruise. I didn't even realize it was an option, and then one day we watched YouTube for most of our entertainment, and a cruise channel was recommended, and I learned about this thing called a repositioning cruise. And if you're not familiar, it's where the cruise line will move the ship from one market to another, and it usually involves going across a major ocean. So it turns out that right around the time that we need to be there for my new job, there's a Disney repositioning cruise. So then I was like, there's no way we can afford this, and started comparing the costs. And it turns out that the price of 4 plane tickets, because we want one for our 1-year-old as well, on a flight that long, isn't that far off from the price of this cruise that we're going to go on. Of course, we're going to be crammed in a small cabin, which I'm sure is going to be really entertaining for all of you. Because we'll try and share as much of that as we can. But the cruise is Disney, so the kids are going to love it. It involves entertainment and meals as part of it. So we're super excited to do that. So we board the cruise. It's 14 nights. We're going to stop along some islands along the way that we've also never been to, so that'll be cool. It ends in Australia, and then we're going to hop a flight over from Australia to Christchurch, New Zealand, which is where we'll be setting up shop. We really hope to bring you guys with us. This is new to us, if you can't tell, talking to a camera and recording, but we're going to do our best to capture as much of it as we can. And we want the vlog to start off being all about that journey and what it's like for some Americans with kids to move to New Zealand. But we also want to share, life in New Zealand and what it's like for us there, getting set up and learning to be Kiwis. And that's it.
Thanks for coming on the journey. Like and subscribe.